The mall smells like warm sugar and department store ambition on most days. The day everything changed, it smelled like neither of those things. She is moving through the afternoon crowd with her 7-year-old daughter attached to her left hand like a small, joyful anchor. The child angling her entire body weight toward a sneaker display in the window of a store they can finally, barely, afford today. 3 months of careful saving. 3 months of packing lunch instead of buying it, of skipping the Friday wine, of rounding up every spare dollar with the quiet discipline of a woman who has learned that small things compound into real ones if you are patient enough. Today is the day. Her daughter knows it too. She has been narrating the journey from the parking lot with the focused enthusiasm of someone who has been planning an outfit around shoes that do not yet exist in her possession. The left one has to have the pink stripe. The right one also has to have the pink stripe. They have to light up when she walks, or the whole thing is a disaster. She is laughing at this. Actually laughing. Not the performed kind she had spent the first year after everything assembling for public consumption. The real kind, the kind that arrives without announcement, the kind that means something. She is not thinking about him. That is the detail she will carry with her for a long time afterward. That she had finally, after 2 years of flinching at footsteps and scanning parking lots before she got out of her car, stopped thinking about him. The therapy had done its work. The new apartment had done its work. The slow, unglamorous, deeply personal project of rebuilding a life from the wreckage of a previous one had done its work. She had arrived, without ceremony, at something that felt like living rather than surviving. Which is, of course, exactly when he appears. Not with warning. Not with the cinematic courtesy of a soundtrack shift or a slow pan. He is simply there between one step and the next, the way a wall appears in a dark room when you are certain you had memorized the layout. His eyes find hers, and in the half-second gap before her body understands what her eyes are seeing, the world performs its cruelest trick. It keeps going. The music keeps playing. Her daughter keeps pulling toward the pink-striped sneakers. His hand finds her throat before her scream finds her voice. The crowd does what crowds do. Phones rise. The recording begins. 40-something people become an audience in the space of 10 seconds, and she's aware of this in the stretched-out, slowed-down clarity of pure adrenaline. She can see the screens. She can see the faces behind them. She can see the complete and total uselessness of being witnessed without being helped. And then she sees him. He is standing 15 feet away, and he is the stillest thing in the building. Dark suit, the kind that has never been on a rack. Face completely unreadable. He could be 35, or he could be 50, and the ambiguity of it has something to do with the fact that his face has clearly been through enough to stop cooperating with ordinary timelines. He is looking directly at her, and then, without breaking eye contact, he begins removing his rings. One by one, unhurried, each one placed carefully into his breast pocket with the precision of someone securing valuables before doing something that requires his full hands. It is the quietest and most unsettling thing she has ever watched because what it communicates without a single word is that whatever happens next has already been decided. Her daughter stops crying. A 7-year-old in the middle of watching her mother being attacked goes completely still the moment this stranger begins to move. Children read things that adults have long since been educated out of noticing. Something in her daughter received a signal that every adult in that mall, with their phones and their recording and their careful distance, completely missed. She does not hear him cross the distance. What she hears is the sound of her ex-husband meeting the floor. His name is Ji-hoon Kwon. She learns this the way you learn things in the aftermath of events that have no protocol. In pieces, through a detective who says the name with a careful neutrality that she registers and files away without fully understanding why. Through a business card that appears in her jacket pocket that she does not remember anyone placing there. through a search that returns results that are extensive and strangely empty of anything real. Hotels. A philanthropy foundation. A 4-year-old profile in a financial magazine in which he speaks at length and reveals absolutely nothing. A man who is very visible and completely opaque. She calls the number because her daughter has asked about him 4 times in 8 days, and because the careful neutrality in the detective's voice has settled into her like a splinter she cannot find precisely enough to remove. He answers on the second ring. His voice has the same quality as his face, not cold exactly, but managed, the way a thing is managed when it has been unmanaged before and the cost of that was high. They meet at a coffee shop he suggests that turns out to be exactly the kind of place a person selects when they want to be in public, but not overheard. He is already there when she arrives. No rings on his fingers. She notices this and notes it and says nothing. He does not perform heroism, does not frame the mall as an act of exceptional character or extraordinary courage. He asks how she is in the specific way that most people do not mean it, and he does mean it, and he listens to her answer with an attention she has not experienced often enough to take for granted. She asks him why he stepped in. He tells her about his daughter. Lost her, he says, not to illness or accident, but to a custody ruling 4 years ago. A case that went wrong in ways he has spent those 4 years trying to understand. A 7-year-old girl he sees in photographs forwarded through lawyers and not in person, which is its own specific kind of grief that he has not made peace with but has learned to carry without letting it show. When he saw her daughter in that mall, he says, with her hand outstretched and her face a perfect portrait of helpless terror, he stopped calculating. She understands this more than she expects to. They stay at that coffee shop for 2 hours, and she does not notice the time passing, which has not happened to her in a conversation with anyone new in longer than she can clearly remember. He is funny in the dry, understated way of someone who does not use humor to perform likability, but deploys it occasionally like a small window opened in an otherwise solid wall. Her daughter, she tells him, has very specific opinions about sneaker aesthetics. He asks what the criteria are. She explains the pink stripe situation. He nods seriously as though this is information worth having. She laughs again, the real kind. The weeks that follow are not what she would have written if someone had handed her the outline of them. No grand gestures, no resources deployed as a substitute for actual presence. What there is instead is a man who shows up at school pickup when her schedule collides with work, on Saturday mornings when her daughter apparently has 17 opinions about the correct way to make pancakes, which she reports to Ji-hoon in complete seriousness, while he listens with complete seriousness. At the end of phone calls that were supposed to last 10 minutes and last much longer without either of them commenting on it. Her daughter tells her one evening at dinner, fork halfway to her mouth, that Ji-hoon is the kind of person who listens when you talk. Then she finishes her bite. Matter of fact. Case closed. She looks at her daughter across the dinner table and feels something settle in her chest that she does not examine too closely because it feels, for the first time in a long time, like something she might actually be allowed to keep. She begins to trust him in the slow, reluctant, specifically careful way of a woman who has learned precisely what trust costs when it is misplaced. Not all at once, in careful installments, each one a small surrender of the vigilance that has been keeping her functional for 2 years. This is, she will later understand, exactly what someone was counting on. It is a Wednesday evening. Her daughter is asleep. The apartment is doing the quiet thing it does when all the day's energy has been used up, the specific settled stillness of a home at rest. She is making tea when she notices the envelope. Plain white. Her name on the front in handwriting she does not recognize. Neat and unhurried. The writing of someone who is not worried about being interrupted. Slipped under the front door at some point in the last few hours while she was inside, which means whoever put it there knows her building, knows her floor, and was not concerned about being seen doing it. She opens it at the kitchen counter. Inside is a photograph. Ji-hoon, standing on the pavement outside her daughter's school. The timestamp in the corner reads 3 weeks before the mall, which means 2 weeks before she had ever heard his name, which means he was outside the place where her daughter spends 6 hours of every weekday on a date, when, according to every version of events she has been given, he had no reason to be anywhere near her life. There's a note card behind the photograph. One line. Asterisk, he chose you long before he saved you. Ask him why. Asterisk. She puts the card down on the counter. She looks at it for a moment. Then she makes her tea, wraps both hands around the mug, and sits with this in the way that she has learned to sit with things that require more than her first reaction. Because her first reaction is to call him immediately and demand an explanation. And she has learned, through the specific education of having her first reactions used against her, to let the shape of something clarify before she hands anyone the opportunity to fill the space with a story. She does not call him that night. She calls him the next morning after the school run, parked outside a coffee shop she chose herself, in a car she can leave if the conversation requires it. He answers on the second ring, as he always does, and she reads him the note card without preamble, and then she waits. The silence that follows lasts 4 seconds. She counts them, because she has learned that controlled people communicate most clearly in the gaps between their words. 4 seconds is not nothing. 4 seconds is a man deciding something in real time about what the next thing he says is going to cost him. He asks if he can come over. She suggests the coffee shop on the corner instead. He is already seated when she arrives. No rings. She sits down and looks at him, and he looks back at her with an expression that is working harder than usual to maintain itself. The difference between a wall that exists and a wall that is being actively held up. He tells her, not in a prepared speech, not efficiently, in the real, slightly uneven way that truth comes out after it has been held in for a long time, starting in one direction and occasionally arriving somewhere slightly different, pausing in places that reveal where the weight is. His ex-wife is not dead. The foundation bearing her name is real. But the story behind it is not the one the financial profile implies. She is alive, in soul, and she has their daughter, and the custody arrangement has calcified into something permanent, because the people who helped engineer the original ruling have an interest in its remaining that way. Those people, he tells her, are the same people who put her ex-husband in the mall. She sets her coffee down. She had not been chosen randomly. She had been identified, observable, proximate to Ji-hoon's regular route between 2 properties, and carrying the specific history of a woman whose vulnerability could be relied upon to produce a predictable response in a man like him. Her ex-husband had been found, located, reminded of his grievances by people who understood that a man with his history and his psychology would not require much encouragement to do something irreversible. He had been used as a weapon, aimed at her, so that Ji-hoon would catch her. The plan had been for Ji-hoon to become attached, to open himself up again after 4 years of keeping himself sealed, to create in himself a visible vulnerability that could be leveraged back against him. What the plan had not included, he says, was that he would tell her any of this. She asks him why he is telling her. He looks at the table, then at her. He says he has spent 4 years being managed by people who understood that grief and love are the most reliable points of entry into a person's defenses. He says he became opaque because opacity was the only thing that worked. He says he does not want to be opaque with her. She looks at him for a long moment. She says that is either the most honest thing she has ever heard or the most sophisticated manipulation she has ever been offered. He almost smiles. He says that is a completely reasonable position to hold. She says she knows. Then she asks him about the detective, the one who said his name with careful neutrality, who arrived at the scene faster than response times should allow. She watches Ji-hoon's face register the question, and she watches him decide to answer it honestly. The detective, he tells her, was placed on her case. Not randomly assigned. Placed by someone within the department with both the authority and the motivation to make that placement usefully. The detective had not been investigating what happened in the mall. He had been verifying that it had. She thinks about the business card in her jacket pocket that she never quite remembered receiving. She asks Ji-hoon if he put it there. He shakes his head. She sits with that for a moment. The card had been placed by someone who wanted her to make contact with Ji-hoon. Someone who was shepherding her toward the attachment they were banking on. Someone who was, even in this detail, several steps ahead of where she had thought the story began. She picks up her coffee, takes a sip, sets it back down. Then she says, "So they built a channel between you and them, and they ran it through me." He says yes. She says, "And they think they still control it." He says yes. She looks at him across the coffee shop table, where neither of them has touched their drinks in 10 minutes, and she says, "Then let's not tell them otherwise." The expression on his face in that moment, she will remember it for a long time. Not the careful managed neutrality, not the wall being held up, something underneath both of those. The look of a man who has spent 4 years alone with a problem and has just discovered, unexpectedly, that he is not alone with it anymore. He starts to explain the risks. She lets him get 2 sentences in, and then she tells him she is aware of the risks. She has a 7-year-old and a job and an apartment she has been building her life in, and she is not proposing anything because it sounds exciting. She is proposing it because the network built their strategy around a version of her that is 2 years out of date, and because she is, it turns out, significantly more useful in this situation than anyone, including Ji-hoon, currently realizes. He asks her what she means. She says the network's file on her is a file on a victim. It contains her history, her psychology, her daughter, her finances, the precise texture of her vulnerability. What it does not contain, because they did not need it for their purposes, is any accurate accounting of what she became while she was busy being all of those things. She has spent 2 years learning to be seen without being known, to perform functional and recovered and not afraid in public in the presence of a world that was watching her to see if she would hold together. She knows how to inhabit a version of herself that is real enough to sustain and different enough from her actual interior to protect what matters. She did not learn this in a training room. She learned it in grocery stores and school pickups and work meetings and every ordinary Tuesday of a life rebuilt in plain sight. She knows how to let someone see exactly what they need to see. Ji-hoon is quiet for a moment. Then he says they will need to decide very carefully what the detective is allowed to see and in what sequence. She says she knows. He says it will require patience. She looks at him with the specific expression of a woman who has been packing her lunch for 3 months to buy her daughter a pair of sneakers and says she is familiar with patience. He smiles. Not the almost version this time. The real one. It is the first time she has seen it, and it does something small and irreversible to the architecture of how she has been thinking about him. The first meeting with the detective, she requests herself, which is exactly what a woman seeking reassurance in the aftermath of trauma would do, and she sits across from him in his office and performs that woman with the precision of someone who has spent 6 weeks calibrating every detail. She lets him see her gratitude, her relief at having someone official in her corner. She mentions Ji-hoon the way a woman who does not know what she is doing would mention him, tentatively, with the particular uncertainty of someone who has been told to be careful and is not sure how careful is careful enough. She watches the detective's eyes when Ji-hoon's name appears in the conversation. The warmth adjusts, microscopically, briefly. It is there, and then it is managed back into place, but she saw it, and seeing it is enough. She leaves with what she came for. She also leaves with something she noticed while he was turned away, retrieving a form. A second phone in the corner of his desk, screen down, which is not unusual. The placement of it is, though, the habitual face-down positioning of a person who does not want the people around them to see notifications arriving from certain numbers. She mentions this to Ji-hoon that evening over takeout at her kitchen table while her daughter colors at the other end of it, and periodically shows them both works in progress that they are required to evaluate with appropriate seriousness. He looks at her. She looks back at him. He makes a call from another room and comes back and tells her that the number associated with that phone traces through 2 steps to a company that traces through 1 more step to an entity he has been trying to confirm a connection to for over a year. She has confirmed in 1 meeting what he has spent 14 months trying to verify. He sits back down at the kitchen table. He looks at her across the takeout containers. Her daughter holds up a drawing of what appears to be a horse, but maybe a dog, and demands their opinion, and they both study it carefully, and Ji-hoon says is the most powerful horse he has ever seen, and her daughter looks extremely satisfied with this and returns to her work. She and Ji-hoon look at each other over the drawing. He shakes his head slightly in the way of a man recalibrating his understanding of a situation. She passes him the noodles. The weeks that follow have a rhythm, not a dramatic one, a working one, the specific productive rhythm of 2 people who are good at different things, combining those things toward a shared problem. She feeds the channel. Ji-hoon maps what comes back. Her daughter continues to hold them both accountable to the important business of pancake standards and horse drawings, and the correct number of minutes a movie night should last before someone tries to negotiate an extension. This part matters, not as decoration, as oxygen, because what she has learned in 2 years of rebuilding a life is that the work of surviving something does not get done in the dramatic moments. It gets done in the space between them. In the school pickups and the takeout dinners and the ordinary evenings that accumulate into proof that you are still here, still choosing the life, still showing up for the small things that turn out to be the actual thing. Ji-hoon learns this alongside her, without being taught it explicitly. One Saturday morning, her daughter decides he needs to understand the full complexity of the pancake situation and installs him at the kitchen counter for a demonstration that takes 40 minutes and produces pancakes that are, her daughter reports, acceptable but with room for improvement. He accepts this verdict with great seriousness. She watches this from the doorway with her coffee and the specific feeling of something fitting into a space she had not known was shaped for it. The mistake, when it comes, is small. Week 5. The detective references something in their meeting that she told Ji-hoon in her apartment. Not the detective, Ji-hoon, in a conversation on a Tuesday evening while her daughter was asleep and the apartment was quiet. She finishes the meeting. She thanks him. She walks to her car and drives 3 blocks and pulls over and sits quietly for exactly 4 minutes because she needs those 4 minutes to move through what the information means before she acts on it. Then she calls Ji-hoon. His team goes through the apartment that evening while she and her daughter are at dinner. Ji-hoon has arranged it at a restaurant her daughter has been requesting for months, and the coordination took 30 minutes and 2 phone calls. And her daughter orders the pasta and declares it life-changing between bites while Ji-hoon listens to the full review with complete attention. She watches him listen, and she thinks about all the ways a person can be present in a life, all the different shapes presence takes, all the things she had confused with presence before she understood what it actually felt like. They find 2 devices, both placed during maintenance visits she had arranged through the building management company over the previous month. The building management company traces to the same entity as the detective's phone. She nods when Ji-hoon tells her this. They are sitting in his car outside her building because the apartment needs to remain exactly as it is. She looks at the building through the window and thinks about the woman who moved into it 2 years ago with a restraining order and a daughter who needed stability and a fierce, quiet determination to make something livable out of what she had been left with. She thinks about all the ways that building has been watched, all the ways the rebuilding itself was observed and cataloged and used. She's not destroyed by this. She's resolved by it. The final meeting with the detective is one he requests, which tells her everything. The network is moving. Something in the information she has been feeding through the channel has made them want to accelerate, which means they believe they are running out of time, which means Ji-hoon's countermoves are landing closer than the network is comfortable with. She goes in with a recording device and the particular settled calm of a woman who has been preparing for this conversation across 6 weeks of ordinary Tuesdays. The detective is less warm. The professional warmth has been turned down by whatever internal pressure is running him now, and the version of him underneath, it is less careful and more useful. He asks her directly about Ji-hoon's current plans. He wraps it in the language of concern. Her safety, her daughter, all the words she is supposed to respond to. She gives him what they prepared. And then she does the thing she and Ji-hoon spent 2 evenings on. She lets something slip. The specific thing. The thing designed to land in a particular place and produce a particular response. She tells him Ji-hoon has found something. She doesn't know what exactly, but that he mentioned someone outside the department, someone federal, a meeting he's been arranging. She says it with the slightly pressured quality of a woman sharing something she probably shouldn't in the presence of a person she has been conditioned to trust. She watches the detective's face. The warmth is gone for 2 full seconds. Then it comes back, reconfigured, working harder than before. He says the right, reassuring things. She receives them with the right, grateful expressions. She leaves. She drives around the block. Parks. Texts Ji-hoon 2 words. He moved. She is not there for what comes next, and this is not a concession she makes reluctantly. It is a line she drew herself. Her daughter is 7 years old, and there is a border between the world that has been asking things of her mother these past several weeks, and the world where that same mother makes pancakes and evaluates horse drawings and negotiates movie night extensions. That border is hers to hold, and she holds it without apology and without explanation. What she knows is what Ji-hoon tells her the following evening. Sitting at her kitchen table, her daughter asleep, the apartment quiet in the way that has started to feel like the right kind of quiet instead of the kind that just means nothing bad has happened yet. The network moved the way networks move when they believe they are running out of time. Inward, consolidating, communicating in ways they would not have risked if they had not felt the pressure of a closing window. And that communication left traces. And those traces, followed by people who had been positioned and waiting for exactly this kind of movement, led to the room at the end of the chain. 3 names. One of them connected to the family court judge who ruled against Ji-hoon 4 years ago. She watches this land on him across the kitchen table. Not the controlled, opaque man of the financial profile. Not the version of him that adjusts his cuffs and surveys threats with the calm of a man who has seen worse. The version underneath all of that, the one that has been carrying 4 years of a specific grief that has no clean resolution, that has been waiting without fully believing it was waiting for the shape of something like this. She does not fill the silence with words. She reaches across the table and puts her hand over his. He looks at it for a moment, the way a person looks at something unexpected that turns out to be exactly what they needed. Then he turns his hand over and holds hers. Properly, like he means it. Her daughter's drawing is still on the table. The powerful horse, or possibly dog. The crayon colors slightly outside the lines in the way of someone who had important things to say and was not going to let the lines get in the way of saying them. They sit there for a while, the 2 of them, in the quiet kitchen of the apartment she built from nothing, and neither of them says anything because there is nothing that needs to be said right now that the quiet isn't already saying better. She buys the sneakers the following Saturday. Her daughter wears them out of the store. Both sneakers, both pink stripes, both lighting up with every step as advertised. She walks in front of her mother through the mall with the specific gait of a child who is aware that her footwear is extraordinary and wants the floor to share in that awareness. Ji-hoon is with them, slightly behind, slightly to the side, in the easy, unhurried way of someone who is exactly where he wants to be and is not performing it. He watches her daughter navigate the crowd with the authority of someone in excellent sneakers, and his expression is the one that has been accumulating over all these weeks and is something that does not need a name anymore. She falls in a step beside him. He glances down at her. She glances up at him. Her daughter turns around to confirm they are still there, and then turns back to the important business of them all. The air smells like cinnamon sugar, like warm ambition, like a Tuesday that has finally, properly, become what Tuesdays are supposed to be, ordinary and loud and sticky-fingered in hers. She takes his hand. He holds it like he means it. They keep walking.